think humans on any level about anything. But we have the products, we have the wonderful effects, so at least if he's a demon, he did a few good things so far.
Well, they continue to obsolete thought.
Yes. Well, that's why you keep listening. You know, it's like surfing. You keep having the waves of ion information push you forward that distracts you from getting preoccupied. You're too busy trying to stay balanced on the board.
Yeah, trying to stay balanced and being balanced.
Yeah.
Two different things.
You know, you're preoccupied. You don't. You're not thinking too much about your mortgage or something when you're surfing. You're proprioceptive. The mind is monitoring your proprioception, which is what Einstein says is your role of the mind.
Monitoring your proprioception.
Yeah, that's the autonomic system.
Yeah.
The movement inside you of whatever autonomics and proprioception is.
Right, the blood flow and circuits, the nervous system and all that.
Balance and inner movement and vertigo sensations. That's what the mind is for, to be monitoring that. It gets slowed down and then starts talking. Think of a slowed down tape.
Yeah, it's like Ian said, it's a Corvette trying to tow a hitch, a heavy trailer. It wasn't meant to do that. No, Corvette.
Corvette.
Ian said it's like a Corvette trying to tow a hitch, heavy trailer.
Yeah. So it starts to slow down and make concepts, and then it slowly gets faster and faster.
Actually, can I read a statement here, a Mcloone statement?
Sure.
I know he's dead and buried, but
say, however,
you read your Mcloone, then Bob will have to make his however statement. That's right.
This is
Hey, Roxy remembered that. She remembered that.
Yeah, that however is a while ago too. That's great. Well, okay, so if this is from Donald Thiel, Messages in Mcloone's Letters, the communicator is correspondent. If, as Mcloone
did you
claims,
send me that, Bert, you sent me that. You found that, right?
It was, I think, mentioned during one of your last, or maybe I came across it listening to one of the last couple paydays.
Yeah, someone sent me that the other day.
If, as Mcloone claims, he is a Thomist, his own theory of communication...
Did you explain this? This is, Mcloone's letters come out in 1987, and that was the beginning of the Mcloone revival, and Laws of Media comes out in 1988. Don Thiel had done the best Mcloone book in 1971. He swore he'd never write anything again, but he reads the letters, and it gives him new information, more about the manipulating part of Marshall. So he's prompted to write a review of the letters, and this is what you're reading. And I read this over CKLN. It was really a really good review. Did you read it all? Did you find it helpful?
It reiterated your statements and ideas and what we're doing here. And when you see this again, it's just fresh and new. Yeah.
Okay. That's the background for it.
Yeah, it's titled Messages in Mcloone's Letters, the Communicator is Correspondent by Donald Thiel. If, as Mcloone claims, he is a Thomist, though of a somewhat hermetic and Neoplatonic nature, his own theory of communication, which he attributes to St. Thomas, can be summed up in the word participation. He sees modern art as being in the business, quote-unquote, of direct participation in experience, quote-unquote, and therefore is no longer being the communication of thoughts and feelings, quote-unquote. In the 20th century, the high arts, quote-unquote, share with the press and advertising agent... In the 20th century, the high arts, quoted, share the press and advertising a, quote, tendency toward participation in a process rather than apprehension of concepts, end quote. Participation occurs through interaction, so that Mcloone is speaking of a communicative action similar to Kenneth Burke's concept of symbolic action, in which all the participants are co-creators. Such a bias towards participation, by which Mcloone characterizes modernity, is the basis of the drama of human communication. For Mcloone associates this communicative action with the activity of making sense, which he associates with the Thomistic conception of the agent intellect. Knowing is making, in quotes, he asserts, and for him the poetic activity is every bit as rational as other forms of communication. This, he claims, concerns the process of recognition and recognition, retracing and thus remaking the product of the labyrinthine human consciousness. His view of communication as a shared process of human making, of producing and reproducing cultural work, one of the leading forms being conversation, recognizes the collective aspect of social communication. Mcloone again and again stresses that he is reading the collective unconscious of the drama of society, even though he uses other signs to symbolize this.
Other what? Other signs?
Other signs.
To communicate this.
To symbolize this, yeah.
To symbolize it. I noticed on the chat line you said knowing is making. You mentioned that, and I was going, that's Mcloone. Maybe you even said it was Mcloone, but I was wondering where you saw that, because I don't think Mcloone ever said actually knowing is making, but it's something that Mcloone would get someone else to say. So you got that. That's Thiel saying that, right? That's where you got it from.
And he's quoting it though.
Oh, is he? Knowing.
And maybe that's a Thomist statement.
Right. But what Thiel said there is really important, and we were trying to talk about participation many hours ago. What was that about, Roxy? Participation versus the literate citizen. Oh, Trump. Trump brings...
How TV made...
no point
politics.
of view. It's just participation mystique.
Yes, and actually I think that's one of the things that makes Trump so popular. He doesn't come and say something about politics and his agenda. He makes people participate.
Yeah.
It's more about that.
We're watching him make knowing. He's knowing. He's getting big discoveries about the political process and how corrupt everything is or how bad he's in these. And so he's expressing his discoveries in a participatory mode. I mean, that totally resonates with what we were talking about many hours ago, that section you read. Very, very appropriate. So is that near the end of the article, or is he saying at the beginning?
Let me find it here. This is in the middle.
Okay. So what did you think of that when you read that? Did it help you?
Well, I thought it was a...
I was laughing because I was thinking about the reviews you're going to get on Reddit.
Wait a minute. I'm asking Bert. I want to see what Bert, what he learned from that, what he just read.
It's a different way of saying this is a process. Engaging this.
It is a good description of Payday with Ion.
Yeah.
So what were you saying, Roxy? You laughed?
I was laughing because I was thinking about the reviews you're going to get on Reddit after this review of the Trump phenomenon.
Did you say Trump's going to get on Reddit? Is that what you just said?
No, you got some criticism or comments on Reddit. So maybe if they find out you...
what are you talking about? The chat line? I don't know what you're referring to. The chat line? Who's criticizing who?
No, and I think in a Trump forum.
Yeah.
They talk about you.
Do they? I didn't know. Oh, yeah. You're talking about when they call me, I channel an alien. Those quotes.
Yes. Yes. So
why do you bring that up?
I thought maybe they will find out that you are talking about the whole thing, the Trump phenomenon.
Yeah, that was...
you'll get some more comments.
Well, right. I did meet the guy who posted it became a phone friend. He got in touch with me, and he's been reading a lot of good stuff, but he had no one to talk about it. So we talked. We had a good conversation one day. But then he started sending me emails with things for me to look at, and I didn't have time to do it. So I haven't responded as much as he may want to what he asked for me. But The guy was an interesting thinker. He's a carpenter, so he's thinking about listening. He's listening to Ion and stuff all day long. You know, as a carpenter, he can do that. So
one thing I noted about Trump. Go ahead, Bob. Did you have a statement?
No, what you read is really important. It's the process of cognition, the stages of apprehension. These phrases I use, he's putting them all in one interesting explanation of what Mcloone's doing. And I was very, very impressed when I read it back 30 years ago, and I read it on the show on CKLN. He wrote the right stuff based on reading all Mcloone's books. He knew what to say about it.
That's exactly right. Yep, he had an accurate sort of translation of what Mcloone was doing.
Yeah. And you read his book, The Virtue March of Mcloone. There's pages and pages of it. It's actually very rich. Pages and pages of very good description of what was going on, what Mcloone was trying to say or be.
Yeah. So I can read another. I have another couple of excerpts that are shorter, if you'd like.
Okay. Yeah.
But I wanted to make one quick statement about Trump. Is just sort of a humorous aside. Is that when he's interviewed, he's looking out into space. He's not making eye contact with anything or anyone, and it's almost like. And in a sense, I could say he's channeling you, Bob. You know how channels they look off into space. They're making their.
Did you hear me the other day talking about he looked like Dave Worcester to me?
Yes.
The way Dave Worcester would be.
Yes.
Yeah, he's staring through them. He's listening to their words. He's responding to their words. He has pretty good instant reaction, but he's sitting there like a Buddha with his big.
And he's giving you these cryptic messages that a quote unquote channel might give you. You know, you're in a warehouse with wheat.
Right. He's doing the granary.
Yeah.
That I did. Yeah, no, I enjoyed looking at him when we did that the other day.
Yeah.
Sometimes he's squinting. He's like looking through he's like, we're looking at these weird aliens interviewing him, and he's sort of squinting at them.
Or they're over the shoulder of the person interviewing him. His contacts, quote unquote, his Bob or whatever, his ethereal Bob, feeding him lines.
No, this could be the finest point of my art, besides Ion, is that I've talked this shit for 30 years, and finally a human being has picked up on it and is being me right in front of everybody.
Well, would that be considered your xenochrony?
Yeah, it's a new kind of possession. This outdoes Rasputin or anybody. I've possessed this fucking guy, from 6,000 miles away.
It's a live xenochrony. It's not recorded.
Right.
You've actually moved up.
Yeah.
It's instantaneous xenochrony.
Yeah, and Ian keeps trying to point this out to you guys. He didn't say it was all about Bob 3 years ago. It's only gradually over the last year he started to emphasize it, right? Or that Bob caused this, caused that. He didn't say that 5 years ago.
But you do that because sometimes I go into some topics just like that, and I don't know why. And then I tell you I was reading this, and you said, "Oh yes, I was reading that too the morning of the revolution."
So you're saying what? You're saying that you're synced in, or I took over your mind?
No, that you do that somehow you send this telepathic.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
So
because it has happened to me many times.
Right. No. Yeah.
I just go into some subject and something that I don't really usually will look into.
Right. And then you said, I was reading about that. Or it happened yesterday. There was something you were looking into. You sent me an email, and I had just been reading that in LaRouche or something.
Yes, it has happened many times. So
yeah.
I think it is really possible that you're doing it.
Right. That's what awareness did. I was involved in transpersonal communication at a very high level of symbolic exchange.
Yes, or I told you about Michel Serre, and you say, "Oh yes, it's in that book." And
it's right here. It's in the book.
Chapter,
yeah.
And it's like, what?
Yeah, that's a good example, Bart. I sent her a whole bunch of books. I had duplicates, so she finds Michael Serres, Serres, through her studies, and immediately I say, oh, that you just got out of the box, that she just opened, and look it up. And I even knew what part of the book it was in, the latter part of the book. And so she goes through, and she doesn't see the name, but she reads off the articles, and then I recognize, oh, that's the title. And so she has a whole essay on Serres that she was sort of intrigued by, and it's done by Croker.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, I was looking for a spelling for his last name.
Yeah, Serres. Okay. And that's a good secret. That's a good example of she discovered Serres early in the day. Then she gets a box of books. She opens them. Then she's telling me about the books. Then she mentions, oh, I was reading about this interesting guy, Michael Serres. I think she wouldn't tell me the name. I said, what's the name of the guy? And she had to look for it and finally came up with it. And I said, oh, he's right over there in that book that you just got.
So anyway, who is Michael?
There's Derrida, there's Lyotard, there's Barth, there's Serres, there's Foucault, Deleuze and Guattari, Virilio, and they're all influenced have ran across Mcloone. They're all trying to translate the Mcloone impact from the late 60s. They're trying to point out, do something that he didn't do or include something that he missed. And
yeah,
Croker,
I started looking.
So Croker looks into them all.
All right.
What?
I jumped into the tail end of that hour where you were mentioning Michael. You asked about Michael Serres, and you were talking about the article and the notion of the other.
Yes. Does he talk about the other, Roxy? I think he does.
Yes, I'm sure most French philosophers do.
They're all designed for different kinds of minds. You know, different kinds of minds go to one of those guys that I mentioned. You know, so a certain maybe Northrop Frye archetypal kind of thinking coming out of Jung is, I think, the Michael Serres quadrant.
So I'd like to read just another excerpt.
Yeah.
From the letters. Here's a Mcloone statement. I have no theories whatever about anything. I make observations by way of discovering contours, lines of force, and pressures. I satirize at all times, and my hyperboles are as nothing compared to the events to which they refer. If you study symbolism, you will discover that it is a technique of rip-off by which figures are deliberately deprived of their ground. You do not seem to have grasped that the message as it relates to the medium is never the content, but the corporate effects with an E of the medium as an environment of service and disservice.
Yeah, that's quite a mouthful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like 100 years ago the painters abandoned.
And that's from. Does it give a? I think that's from a letter. That's the kind of statement that Don had not seen before. He was quite taken by the stuff that Mcloone was writing to people. But that's a letter, right? Is that one to William Kuhns, Kuhns?
Say that again?
Is that a letter to William Kuhns, Kuhns? Like, does it give a, look it up, the number at the end of the quote and see what it is in the footnotes. Yeah,
it's 80 from 1987, 448. Is that letter 448?
No, it means page 448.
Okay.
Does it say who is the letter to?
It doesn't, at least in this article.
Oh. Does he have the name before the letter, before the quote, in the sentence that introduces the quote?
Let me see here. In one of his recently published letters, Marshall Mcloone gently disagrees with a writer who had failed to understand his work since, primarily the writer who had not previously studied Joyce or Baudelaire.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the letter to William Kuhns, who went on to to live with Mrs. Mcloone and try to write a biography, and it didn't work. I don't know why he failed, but he ended up leaving, going back to Quebec or someplace where he lived. I think Mary Mcloone told me about him. Oh, Mary Mcloone called in last week, but she said, I don't think she understood the technology. It said that, I guess it tells you you're on mute, that you're muted, right?
Yeah.
And so she thought she would never get to speak. For some reason, the Android told her she was muted, so she just immediately listened. But didn't expect to ask anything because she didn't know how to get out of the unmuted state.
Well, but because when you tune in, it says always your line is muted.
Yes.
And
I didn't expect her. I would have seen her phone number if I was expecting her, and I would have unmuted her. So she was puzzled by that, why she was muted. She took it personally. We know who you are.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I want to continue. All this is for the benefit of the Zappa people who listen to this, because we're still doing Zappa. And it's all relevant. Zappa, much of what Marshall said, Zappa did too. In the process of perception. So let's continue with what this guy says. Okay. All right. Zappa mostly sits in his basement in Laurel Canyon and works. He is a compulsive worker, and when on the road, he writes when not performing or rehearsing. Sometimes he writes while the band performs. Sometimes they are simultaneous actions. Meanwhile, he is also looking out around him and checking the events and people for more material. Say something funny within 50 feet of Frank Zappa, and you might well hear it on an album. In brackets, honest, that's what all the guys in the band say in the movie. That's also what Larry the Dwarf says in the movie. Larry, by the way, is played by Beatle drummer Ringo Starr. He looks strangely like the Mother's guitar player. It's all part of the plot. End of bracket. Zappa's main themes, the other side of American life, as typified by the Southern California style, as well as national sex habits, life values in general, and life's repugnant side in particular, either drive you off steaming or get your attention onto what he's saying. These themes, used throughout his material in the part, are, of course, These themes used throughout his material in the part are, of course, the base for 200 Motels. Then he quotes a section in the movie. Centerville, a nice town too. That's the end of the quote. Centerville, a nice town too. This is Flo and Eddie are sort of creeping through a small town and are saying this. Then he writes, groupies, rednecks, drug freakouts, and monsters, all flavored with a touch of concentration camp. All fair spots to stop on the tour. Centerville, a nice town too. Groupies, rednecks, drug freakouts, and monsters, all flavored with a touch of concentration camp. All fair spots to stop on the tour. The film itself, now that's something. Zappa has always wanted to work with tools over and above those provided by the members of his band. There have been several memorable Mothers meetings with symphony orchestras and musicians, and a lot of Zappa experimentation with film before, but never has he had the opportunity and the money to put it all together in a controlled package. His Uncle Meat, the soundtrack of which was released as an album a couple of years ago, has never been finished, even though much of the footage is not only truly documentary, but has already been shot. The reason the picture has lain dormant? No money. Shit, back to this one. The writer goes, shit, back to this movie. Zappa's basic forces for 200 Motels. Then he lists them. The mothers, the current mothers, the mothers from the past, that's Jimmy Cole Black, Jim Sherwood, and Don Preston. Theodore Bickel, in brackets, in the lead, sort of. Ringo Starr as the devious Larry the Dwarf. Keith Moon as the hot nun, in brackets, groupie. Martin Lickard, Ringo's ex-chauffeur, plays Jeff Simmons, ex-Mother's bass player. Janet Ferguson and Miss Lucy as the groupies. Mother's roadie Dick Barber plays the vacuum cleaner. Miss Pamela Miller plays a rock and roll newspaper reporter. The Royal Philharmonic Orchestra plays itself, as do the top score singers, in brackets, a choral group. and there are also a number of dancers appearing in places likely as well as un. And there are also a number of dancers appearing in places likely as well as un. That must be misprint. He also
Bob?
had, yeah?
What's the title of the article you're reading?
200 Motels, What's the Deal? If you go to one of those Zappa archives, you probably find it.
Okay, yeah, there's a site, I think called about afka.com or something.
Yeah, one of those places, yeah. Kill Ugly Radio or Africa. It's called 200 Motels, What's the Deal? So he then says Zappa also had the facilities of Pinewood Studios in London and expert help in choreography, direction, etc. And now the crux of it all, the film created from the amalgamation. The form for the story is life on the road, the unreal world of a traveling rock and roll band, the warped intensity that the road gives to individual events and to all events, which then tend to converge into a single reality. The overkill of setting up, playing, leaving, arriving, meeting people, walking down another main street, living in a carbon copy motel room, a copy motel room, a motel room, all the same motel room, all the same reality. Every different place tends to be the last and the next place. Every different fact of life in that town becomes life in all towns and in no towns. Every little bit of every waking minute becomes a repetitive game, and the tunnel vision that is the result is reflected in this moving picture. Now, given that premise, what would you do? Make a documentary? Recreate scenes abstracted from several events? Write a comedy and hire the monkeys to play the lead? Give it up as a drag? Well, anyone would be okay. But based on Zappa's track record, he did what he did. He satirized, he glamorized, he fantasized. He put it to music so that if it moved you, you could dance to it. Just as back in 1967, the Mothers had the nerve to open their act as an off-Broadway review and invite the theater critics, the years not having taken their toll, find the Mothers of today flashing Zappa's maniacal wit out from the once silvered screen. Let me read that. Just as back in 1967, the Mothers had the nerve to open their act as an off-Broadway review and invite the theater critics. The years, not having taken their toll, find the Mothers of today flashing Zappa's maniacal wit out from the once silvered screen. 200 Motels is a multi-level, non-objective, out-of-sync with reality experience that people not oriented to the style will find very confusing. It is a multicolored, phantasmagoric, flashing, crashing assault of sound and sight. It will leave you wasted either in the beginning, the middle, or the end, according to your own ability to respond, evaluate, and retain. That's Payday, right? The Payday description.
Mm-hmm.
To come out of your first viewing of the picture with a clear idea of what happened is very unlikely. To come out of the first time through humming the tunes is also unlikely, even if you heard the album first. To keep things popping along, the sequence of the album doesn't match that of the film either. If you happen upon the album before you see the film, don't try too hard to follow it all. It doesn't work that way. If, on the other hand, you see the film first, don't hope that the album will thrill your memory cells and carry you along that magic path of remembrance like your love story soundtrack does. This album goes into your mother's pile and has a place in relation to some of the stuff on Chunga's Revenge and the Live at the Fillmore East album, in both of which you'll find more songs and music relating to 200 Motels, in fact, written for it. The movie hit me a lot like Freak Out did back in 1966. Amazing if you get into it, but it could give you a real headache if you don't want to listen. Zappa sort of confirmed this when he said, quote, 200 Motels is a film version of Freak Out. It's the ultimate extension of the Freak Out album cover, unquote. There have been a lot of other Freak Outs, see the lowercase f, on film. For instance, Satyricon and El Topo. We were talking about El Topo a couple of weeks ago. That's Jodorowsky. And Fellini did Satyricon. There have been a lot of rock and roll and music-based documentaries from Monterey Pop and Woodstock on up and down. There have also been loads of films based on operas and operettas and other musical things. But as in the Freak Out album, Zappa has taken the time and trouble to assimilate all the styles as they have been established and not only meld them together, but add another crazed dimension to the whole package. When you see 200 Motels, and I hope you do, let it dance in front of your face and run around through your head. That's the first time. Then in other next times, fit the pieces together. If reading this makes you feel that the picture's a multi-level jigsaw puzzle, you're very right. If reading this stuff makes you think that 200 Motels is a maniacal, disjointed trip, you're wrong. If bright colors and loud noise bother you, you might well find yourself outside the theater of your choice before the film is over. If not, you'll probably sit through a couple of showings. At that point, of course, they will come and take you away. And if on a whole other level you are familiar with Mother's albums and shows, you will find some clues in the film to the particular thrust of many of the things that Zappa has played with before. If this has at all been the least bit confusing to you, and you want to know from a more traditional point of review, whether you should go see this movie, then, and so now this is a sidebar, a different, darker print. So this is, I guess, his short summary of the film. Frank Zappa has created a masterful audio and visual feast. His character directions are honed to perfection as he portrays musicians on the road, groupies, rednecks, lovable and otherwise, musicians not on the road, heartland America, and other facts and fantasies of life. Tony Palmer's visual direction is well done and does give a certain strange cohesiveness to the multi-level imagination of Zappa, who also wrote the screenplay and composed and arranged the music. The use in a commercial film for the first time, as far as I know, of the videotape to film process is milked for all it's worth. See, he films it on videotape and then transfers it to a 35 millimeter film. The flexibility in shooting a film using this system and the range it gives a director and editor in achieving every conceivable visual effect will establish a trend in filmmaking. The cast includes the mother's invention, both past and present, and a highly unlikely mixture of other performers. Ringo Starr, at his comedic finest, plays Larry the Dwarf, which is a parody of Zappa, and Theodore Bikel as Rance Muhammad, a very friendly Lucifer figure, turns in a credible bit of insanity. Keith Moon, the Who drummer himself, as the hot nun, is disjointedly funny, and particular mention must be made of Janet Ferguson and Lucy O'Farrell, who play the groupies with wit, conviction, and great presence. The choreography by Gillian Lane beautifully melds with the overall surreal quality of the film, and the dancers. The choreography by Gillian Lane beautifully melds with the overall surreal quality of the film, and the dancers are particularly talented as well. The Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, conducted by Elgar Holworth, and the top score singers, directed by David Van Ash, add dimension not only to Zappa's compositions, but are used visually as an integral part of some of the subplots. The found footage of the orchestra and the singers not only adds measurably to the portrayal of the story, but gives added depth to their individual performances. Special mention must also be made of an animated sequence appearing in the film titled Dental Hygiene Dilemma. We've played that on the show here. Not only is the animation and concept brilliant, but its overall bizarre nature will be considered by some to be the singular, outstanding piece of footage in the movie. Mickey Mouse was weird at times, but nothing like this. So that's his straight summary. And then he finishes, and then he goes, so much for that. A dedicated mother's freak, and only a very dedicated mother's freak, might just ask himself after seeing the flick, why Zappa hadn't gotten even more bizarre. Why perhaps he hadn't put more into the film. For instance, the material in the Fillmore Live album. No one in 200 Motels does the mud shark. I wondered about that too, so I asked Zappa. Zappa's answer. My answer is, he said, I'll give you $679,000 and see what you can do with it up against a bunch of unions and an orchestra, a director that quits 5 times while you're shooting, and given all those other variables, let's see how far you go. Unquote. Maybe next time United Arts will see its way clear to lay a couple of million on Zappa, and he'll have more than 7 days to shoot a film, and we'll see just how bizarre it can really be. But in the meantime, you really ought to see 200 Motels a few times. It's fun, it's exciting, it's weird, it's insane. It's a peek into Zappa's mind that is made easier, not harder to understand, despite your first confusion. It's made easier, not harder to understand, despite your first confusion, by the visual dimension. Zappa has been with us for a lot of years now. He's going to be doing his things for quite a while longer. He may well outlive creatively all his contemporaries and so become a bigger and bigger part of this culture we have here. Early Zappa will one day, and it may be soon, become nostalgia. And when it does, 200 Motels will be on your own private late show. And that's the end. So that's a very good review.
Yeah.
Rick Bolsom. He's probably dead. Probably got busted selling dope. And we haven't heard from him. And that was that. Here's a good quote. Here's what Zappa says under the category of philosophy. I believe the basic stuff of the universe is in the shape of waves, not subatomic particles. LaRouche would agree with Zappa there. Then, if the two components of the universe, waves and time, are actually one, and if a wave equals a wave, all time equals all other time, and you aren't going nowhere because you've already been there. Viewing this whole mechanism from a distance, it would just be a solid object. How's that? Pretty ionic there.
Yeah.
Right.
Manifest matter.
No, yeah, that's kindergarten stuff compared to ion, but not bad 45 years ago, right?
But the idea is, I think.
He says you're not going. He explains. He says if time equals all other time, and you aren't going nowhere because you've already been there. That's the neutrino. Then, if the two components of the universe, waves and time, are actually one, and if a wave equals a wave, all time equals all other time, and you aren't going nowhere because you've already been there. That's brilliant, the last part, because you've already been there.
Yes, and there is also these explanations about how particles, a set of particles, one particle can be somewhere in the universe and the other particle somewhere else, and they affect each other.
Yes.
They're somehow in contact with each other, so yes, it's amazing how we are rediscovering that we can be here and there to physicals and all these things.
Right. Now, I'm going to, we could end the Zappa thing, but I wanted to see, we've got some people here. Let's see if they want to contribute some statements about Zappa. Okay, so I've unmuted everybody. Do you have anything to say about what we're doing?
Who is a Bernie Sanders follower?
Bernie Sanders. So none of you have anything to say? You all hate Zappa?
Oh, good Lord! It was a perceptive statement that he made 40 years ago. I agree.
Right. Why are you saying "Good Lord"?
Well, because nobody's saying anything.
Right.
It was very perceptive.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. 45 years ago.
Yeah.
Almost 50.
Oh, 40. Right. 45. Yeah. That was 71.
70. Yeah, about 71. He said this.
Yeah.
It's amazing that almost 50 years and he sounds so fresh.
Yeah. Like that new piece that I played today that Susanna found is really good. Did you guys hear that? Like you don't hear the opening music, do you, Roxy? You're sleeping.
Sometimes, but today I was sleeping.
Okay, let's listen to this beginning. So it goes on with a couple other songs.
Amazing.
Isn't that beautiful?
Amazing.
Yeah.
The beginning and that trumpet.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It makes you feel like making sweet, sweet love.
So.
Well, they are.
Perfect timing.
Yeah.
Beautiful sentences.
Listen to the critic here, Bert. Bert, sentences and paragraphs, Roxy, clause of subjectivity.
So beautiful how they...
His punctuation was erotic.
Solos.
Yeah, great punctuation there. The drums, and then the guitar, and then the horn. Isn't it great how it starts? And then it goes, a nice piano, and then it goes to the big horns, and then it goes into a great ecstatic guitar, and then a quiet horn. Jesus, you can't get better than that.
Horny.
I sent it around to some of the old dogs, and they wrote back, one of them wrote back, "This is the most amazing Zappa music I've ever heard." And Kevin's saying, "Very beautiful." Kim finds it beautiful. It's what is it? You can't resist it, right? A tone-deaf person.
That's music.
Yeah.
That's real music. The when everybody's in perfect timing and everything is so beautiful.
Yeah. Now, you played classical music. Did you, in your schooling, you were young, did more the older stuff? The 19th century music is what you would play in class?
Yes, because when I was in the conservatory, I was first on violin.
Right.
There's a lot of Baroque music.
Baroque. So you know what you guys achieved in your classes. You know, Frank you know what they're achieving here.
Yes, it takes a lot of practice to be able to play with so many people in such a perfect timing, and just jump from one person to the other, just like they're gliding like butter.
Right.
You don't see any jumping, any interruption, or like
they make it look too easy.
Flowing.
Yeah, they rehearse, but then they do things spontaneously, right? While they're performing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so, because they do, it's 3 songs. It's Eat That Question, formerly Eat That Christian. And my interview with Zappa brought that point out. And then it becomes, it ends any kind of pain, and in between is some other song. I guess maybe I posted it. What is that? No, I don't think I didn't fill out. So there's 3 titles mixed together, and I assume it happened live, that it was not edited. But I'd never heard it before, and Susanna found it the other day. So it's a great find. We could unite the world on that. It could become the national anthem, right?
Yes, I agree.
that and Strictly Gentile, if you change the nation.
Oh, yeah, Strictly Gentile is great. So I found, here's another interview. It says, concluding Frank Zappa, February 1972, on death, rock writers, and money. So I don't think I know this. So it says, Zappa is not renowned for his appreciation of rock writers and their work, and he makes his point quite forcibly on the subject. So here's the quote. Mr. X comes over to do an interview. He has not seen a show or listened to the records, but he went to a place that has a large bunch of clippings, and he gains his information from what other guys wrote, and they didn't know. And then he comes and does an interview with you, and it perpetuates itself. I know this is an important factor in the way any artiste who is doing interviews gets portrayed to the public. It's difficult to get your point across 100% because it's being translated, interpreted, modified, restructured, reslanted, reorganized, regurgitated by somebody else who's going to do that to suit his own artistic and political ends, depending on who and what he is writing for. I would say this. The level of pop journalism in the United Kingdom seems to be superior to that of the United States, although it may be an illusion. However, neither are good. There are, of course, exceptions to everything, and I'm sure sprinkled throughout the world there are a few good rock and roll writers, and to you brave few, I salute you. To the rest of you guys, I hope you earn a living. End of quote. So then the journalist says, and so bearing that little lot in mind, here I bring to you a chunk of stimulating verbatim straight from the tape recorder on a few topics of mutual interest. So it says, he was asked, is he bothered by the John Sebastian syndrome? I don't know what that is. Was he a member of the Loving Spoonful? I don't know. So Zappa says, I would rather not discuss it. I find it very sickening, but there again, some people get off on it, so it should happen. Some people need wonderful people, even if they're made out of cardboard. So then, next quote, does anything frighten him? Old age, death. The old age, death? He says, no, I haven't explored the avenue of death yet because I'm still alive. And the only way to really do that is to clap out. End of quote. What would he say was the most painful experience he ever had mentally? Zappa says, the most painful, I've never seen these answers. The most painful experience I've had recently on a mental level was watching a U.S. TV show on which we performed, and the sound was completely fucked up. That troubled me quite a bit. Unquote. Does he feel there's any age limit one could place on being a musician? He says, no. I hope I will still be on stage playing the guitar when I'm 50. I love to play the guitar. It's one of the great physical sensations of all time. Unquote. Do the deaths of people like Joplin, Janis Joplin, Hendrix, and Jim Morrison concern him at all? He says, I knew all those people, but I don't think their deaths affected me. I can quite honestly say that. I could make myself sound dramatic and loyal to the rock and roll cause, but I won't say that I was moved. I would just say that the one that I knew the best was Jimi Hendrix, and I was surprised. I don't see why I should be moved by the death of someone else. Mourning is not productive. Perhaps I'm inhuman. That's a pretty good statement, eh?
Yeah.
Did he think there any significance in the fact that those three people died closely together? Frank says, yes and no. There were similarities between the lifestyles of them, but they were all individuals. Also there were horrible differences between all three of them. Definitely three separate categories, each with his own peculiar little wheel gravitating around. Each with his own peculiar little wheel gravitating around. Did he think we would be subjected to further losses among well-known rock artists? He goes, yes, with an exclamation mark. No, it does not sadden me. I don't think it is anything to be sad about because it's irrelevant. Man, this guy is really not even concerned about this phenomenon of death. No, it's irrelevant. That's pretty unique. Okay, here's one I've never...
I think he was against those type of cult following, so he will not promote that type of...
Yeah, he's not into you identifying with someone else's death. It's irrelevant to you. It has nothing to do with you. I would agree with that. Right?
Yes, it's their choice.
Yeah. So then, here's a question I haven't read this interview. We've had it here for 30, 40 years, and they go, how dangerous a medium does he consider TV? He says, the evils done in the States over the last 20 years, that would be 52 to 72, the evils done in the States over the last 20 years in terms of modifying the public's opinion has given us a set of standards which are perhaps far out of line from the biological norm. That's what Mcloone says. All that damage has to be repaired by the medium that caused it, i.e. the box. All that damage has to be repaired by the medium that caused it. Then the guy writes, Zappa is certainly not obsessed by the idea of material wealth, but he's certainly too shrewd to minimize its importance. What he earns, he likes to ensure he gets. He still takes risks, of course, in a bizarre fashion. Like, for example, the plan to release 9 albums in March, 3 triple album sets of unreleased Mother's material. They will retail at $7.98 in America for a set of 3, which is extremely reasonable and only possible because Zappa is prepared to take a royalty cut. Even so, he is not a poor man, and so, quote, he's asked, what sort of financial share do your musicians and your band have in their work? What sort of financial share do your musicians and your band have in their work? Frank says, they are paid on a regular salary basis, and it varies on a tour, depending on what the potential gross of the tour is. They don't have a percentage interest. Their percentage is in the records, not on the tours. Before they go out on a tour, they get a guaranteed figure of what they will earn by the end of it. Unquote. Does he feel at all guilty about making a lot of money out of his music? He says, I find nothing wrong in a person being able to support his daily activities for the purpose of earning a living from something he likes to do, and from something he might be able to contribute to other members of the society. For instance, if the guy is a composer in the United States, you can't earn a living out of it. If you want to have the privilege of writing a symphony, you're going to work in a gas station during the daytime so that you can eat while you do it. To me, that's bad because it minimizes the proficiency of the composer, and the guy gets uptight because he has to spend the day doing something he does not like, and after he has written his symphony, he can't even get it played. That's what I was faced with at the time when I was doing music. I wanted to write music. I had no way to get it played. I had no way to support myself, so I did one of the hardest things there is to do. I managed to earn a living from something I liked doing. I got my music performed. I haven't always had it performed accurately, and I haven't always enjoyed listening to the performance of the things I have written. You just can't achieve perfection in that regard. I think if I may be allowed a smashing generalization, everybody has the right to be comfortable on his own terms. If they sat down and thought about it, that's really what they're after, unless the person is a born warmonger and likes to have strife and unrest all the time. An average sort of person, well, he just likes to be comfortable and happy. So that's a pretty good interview. The Evergreen...
Yes, and Pauline Oliveros told us she actually didn't make a living as a composer, but mostly from her workshops, her performing and
her teaching. Yeah. I just wanted to say the Evergreens... I started talking to the Evergreens in 1980, and I started talking about Zappa in 1980. Then I did 3 interviews in 1980 with the Evergreens, and then I waited 5 years and did another one. But in one of those interviews in 1980s, they said, in the early 1980s, they said that he was one of the most rational people on the planet. That's what they said about Zappa. Yet the public thinks he eats shit. That's a good statement. He's very balanced in his statements. You get that, Bert?
No, he's a righteous dude.
Righteous dude? No, that's silly. Don't say that. He's not righteous.
He was he was very perceptive, and he was performing ionically, just in the way that he approached his life.
And the things he said. Nobody says what he says about love. Nobody says what he just said about death.
No, and the way that he
was not worrying about being politically correct.
Or spiritually correct. Or nutritionally correct.
Yeah.
Right.
I was thinking too about the participation aspect of his performing. That he just looks out at the world around him, and whether he's performing on stage or not, and grabs things to incorporate and reflect back. That participation is a lot like Payday, and different where you have other performers who, especially recently, where they their concerts are recorded. They're sort of lip syncing. They're just They're performing they're not detached, but they're a pre-recording basically, and they've shifted that experience of performing or interaction.
Who are you referring to?
Just pop stars, pop artists who get on stage and their concerts are pre-recorded. They just lip sync to them.
Oh, yeah, is that right? Do they do that?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I mean, they used to do it in the 50s, but they're doing that now?
Yes, and you probably have these singers just mugging. They're mugging to the cameras. They're playing to the audience, but it's a different form of engagement than Zappa was engaged in.
Right.
No. There's no doubt that
there has been some. There have been some cases where, for some reason, the audio goes out and you actually hear their real singing, and it's like awful. Like, oh, what happened?
How do you hear the real singing? I mean, they're actually singing.
Because they're actually sometimes singing on top of the
audio track
simulation. And it slips through.
If there is a problem with the playback,
right,
that for some reason it stops or whatever, and they are really singing, it's like, what happened there?
Yeah, there was. So, yeah.
So what? How long has that been going on? Is it because the equipment is so good now?
No, mostly it's because they have to sing, they have to perform and change and all these things. So, I mean, just to do, I don't know, maybe 2